What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Sean Jones NBA Show. I'm recording this on Sunday, July 26th. And after weeks of anticipation, LeBron James has finally picked a team, and he will be signing with the Philadelphia 76ers. So going to talk about all the ramifications of this, the on-paper outlook for the team, what are some of the biggest variables for them to be successful, what do the Sixers need on the roster still to help kind of round this thing into shape, where does Philly stack up in the East, did LeBron make the right choice, where does this leave the other suitors that were pursuing him, and everything else related to this signing. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. So on Friday morning around, I think it was 11:30 a.m., Shams dropped the bomb that LeBron will somewhat surprisingly be signing with the Philadelphia 76ers on a 2-year deal worth $8 million, a little under $4 million the first year, a little over $4 million the second year. Second year will be a player option. And LeBron tweeted out a little thread, said that this would be his, quote, last decision, sort of implying that he's not going to be switching teams again after this and that this is his last hurrah. It's going to be at least 1 year, maybe 2 years. We shall see. And I'll just say off the bat, I was very surprised by this decision. I thought it was going to be the Heat or the Cavs pretty much all the way. If it wasn't going to be one of those teams, I thought probably the Warriors. But a lot of reports had come out that the Warriors were maybe less realistic of a destination as time kind of went on. And the Sixers were listed in that top 5 teams that he was considering, but I kind of thought that was more of a media-driven narrative thing just because they had made the big Jaylen Brown move. They obviously still have Maxey and Embiid and Edgecombe, and they had some nice fringe signings this free agency. And so if they were to sign LeBron, it would put together quite the star-studded lineup and all that. But I just never really saw this as a real option. I kind of always thought he would default to something more comfortable or just somewhere where he had some sort of ties. Obviously, won a championship in Cleveland, won a championship in Miami, never played for Golden State, but very close with Steph and Draymond. He's become over the years and obviously has gone to war with that team quite a bit. So he, in some capacity, has a history there. But the Sixers, no real history, no real ties, no real allegiance of any kind. It really feels like he just looked at this roster and said, I think it's the most talented team I could play for that's at least in consideration here. And so I'm going to take a swing here. And I think maybe he did kind of want a new challenge or something new. Like the Heat and the Cavs, he already accomplished the goal there. And so it wasn't going to be some massive, I'm the savior of the team if he wins, because he already won there. Versus, going to the Sixers, they are a franchise that has not won in over 40 years. They have not made it to even the conference finals in 25 years. They have been perpetually disappointing, dysfunctional at times, though they are a historic franchise. So if he is able to sort of elevate them to that next level, then I do think he will get a lot of those flowers. And there were even reports that if the Knicks had not won the championship, that was his first choice, and he probably would have been in New York. And I'm pretty sure Rich Paul said that verbatim. But obviously it was never going to happen once they did win the championship this year. So the Sixers were kind of a similar fallback option of just like historic franchise, struggled as of late, hasn't been able to get over the hump, but still lots of talent. So I get that to an extent, but obviously let's get into sort of the on-paper outlook here for the Sixers next season and moving forward. There's no doubt that this starting 5 is insanely talented. Like if you're just talking best starting lineups in the NBA, Spurs, Thunder, Knicks, and then I'm not sure there's really an argument for another team other than the Sixers to round out that top 4 in some order, whatever you want to say, at least on paper. And if you just go down, I mean, LeBron James, despite the fact that he's going to be 42 in December this year and for the majority of this upcoming season, is still incredibly good at basketball. There's no way around it. I mean, he averaged 23, 7, and 7 last year. He was an all-star. He was the best player in a postseason series. He won a first-round series with Marcus Smart, Rui Hachimura, and Luke Kennard as his 3 best players around him. Did not have probably another top 100 player in the league on his roster and still was able to pretty comfortably take down the Rockets. I know KD was hurt, but hey, they were favorites to sweep him if KD was going to play. So KD really shouldn't be the difference between sweeping and losing the series, especially when they still had Amen Thompson, Şengün, Jabari Smith, all those other guys, and theoretically a deeper, better, more talented team around them. So to me, LeBron is still a top 20 player in the league. Fringe, he's in that 20 range. I do think he slipped a little bit last year compared to what we had seen, but it's easy to forget. Just 1 year ago, this guy was 6th in MVP voting in 2025. He was second team All NBA. So he had a top 10 player in the league season just a year ago. And again, it's not like he was bad this past season, just got off to a slow start with the sciatica and then wasn't healthy to start the season. And, was kind of trying to find his role next to Luka and Reeves was a little more deferential. So once they went down, he kind of picked up more of the slack. But regardless, LeBron, very, very good player still, even at this age. Tyrese Maxey averaged 28 points, 7 assists last year, was an All-NBA player, All-Star 2 of the last 3 seasons. In my opinion, is a bona fide top 15 player in the NBA at this point. Joel Embiid, for all the health things and the hate that he gets, he still averaged 27, 8, and 4 last year. Only 3 years removed from winning an MVP, only 2 years removed from averaging 35 points per game. And so when he still plays, he is at a top 20 level, at least when he's healthy. So very, very good. Joel Embiid still is when he's on the court, and especially in the first round against the Celtics. He looked legit, man. I mean, he won that series for them, if we're being totally honest. Him getting back in the lineup is what shifted things. Then Jaylen Brown, their other big-time addition, 29 points per game last year, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. He finished 6th in MVP, 2-time second-team All-NBA player, 5-time All-Star, won a Finals MVP, a top 15 to 20 player, in my opinion, as well. So the talent in this team's absurd, and that's not even to get to VJ Edgecombe, who averaged 16, 6, and 4 as a rookie, was all-rookie first team. Had a good enough year where in a normal year, easily could have won Rookie of the Year, but this was a stacked class, obviously, with Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper and Con Knippel, et cetera. But like VJ had a really, really good rookie year and projects to be a really good player. So that starting 5, just from a sheer talent perspective, is pretty hard to argue with. And it's easy to forget that like this team won 45 games last year, and that's with Embiid playing only 38 games, Paul George playing only 37 games. And so they were able to overcome those guys not being healthy for more than half the season and still win 45 games and be comfortably in the playoffs. And obviously they won a playoff series. So like, if you just look at the additions versus the losses, they lose Kelly Oubre, Quentin Grimes, Andre Drummond, and then obviously Paul George in the Jaylen Brown trade. But then they're adding LeBron James, Jaylen Brown. They get Anthony Simons on a very team-friendly deal, Dean Wade, and then they draft LeBaron Philon. So just in the door, out the door, it's a massive upgrade from what they had. And I think one thing that is probably a big reason why LeBron signed here, aside from just the talent, is the just floor that this team's going to have. The infrastructure of having Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Maxey, and VJ Edgecombe is just going to give them on a night-to-night basis a really good chance to compete because those guys play games. They're all extremely durable to this point in their career. VJ is obviously super young and was healthy throughout his entire career to this point. Tyrese Maxey was a little banged up in previous years, but I think he was top 2 in minutes in the league last season. I mean, Nick Nurse really played him to death a little bit, but played through it, was able to sustain the full season and still be super effective come postseason time. And then Jaylen Brown, just been a consistent 65 to 70 plus games per season guy. So those 3 guys alone, plus whatever they can patch together around them, regardless of if LeBron misses time, if Embiid misses time, like they can handle the offensive load and the grind of a regular season. And so LeBron is not going to be majorly relied on here to have to carry that load and have to score 25 points per game, have to be some defensive stop or any of that. You know, he can kind of pick his spots. And I think that's kind of what he wants to do, just given where he is at his career. And he also fills one other big hole that the Sixers had, in my opinion, which is playmaking. They've got a lot of talent. You know, Brown, Maxey, and Embiid, those guys can all score. They can all go get themselves a bucket. There's no question about that. And I do think that particularly Maxey and Embiid and Brown to an extent, but I think less so than those two, they do make guys around them better. But they do it more indirectly than directly. Like, I think that the gravity of those players and the attention they garner from the defense is what causes that. Whereas LeBron does it in that way, but also more in the sense of like he is manipulating defenses. He is making advanced level reads, finding open guys, knowing where they're supposed to be in their spots before they even get there. He's one pass ahead of the pass that's being made right now every single time. And so I just think he's such a weapon as a playmaker. And again, he doesn't need to be the guy that's playing point guard 24/7, but even if he's just more of a Draymond Green role, for example, and the offense running through him is sort of a hub, not bringing the ball up necessarily, but he just brings another dimension as a facilitator that they just didn't have. And so it's going to be less Jaylen Brown having to go ISO and get himself a shot. It's going to be less dump the ball down to Embiid and make him go to work, or Maxey on a screen roll or something like that. These guys are going to get better looks in more comfortable spots with LeBron James being on this team. And he's just going to find guys in a way that the rest of the core of this team, I don't think really had that. Not that they're incapable of it, but it's not exactly their strong suit. They're score first guys, all of them, if we're being totally honest, and they can play make, but it's more of a like make the easy read off of the initial defensive look. And LeBron is thinking 2-3 reads ahead and manipulating it in a way that, again, these guys just didn't have that in their back. But I still do think there are a ton of variables that could determine how this plays out. I'm not going to sit up here and say that this is no-brainer, Sixers are favorites in the East or anything like that, because I think there's a lot at play here that could either make this go really well or make this be one of those cautionary tales where we say that, talent alone doesn't win games. The pieces have to fit together. So the first one here, obviously, is the Embiid factor. How many games is he going to play? He's played 96 games the last 3 seasons combined. That's only 32 per year. And I know there's even been discussion of like, well, do they trade Embiid for AD or pieces like Gafford and PJ Washington and blah, blah, blah and all that. And it's fun to make Embiid the brunt of the jokes and people want to, shit on him time and time again. But despite popular belief, the team has been significantly better when Joel Embiid plays over really his whole career, but even in recent years where people want to discredit him for what he can do for this team. In 2024, they were 31-8 when he played and 16-27 when he did not. So they were by win percentage an elite level team when he played and a awful lottery team when he didn't. 2025 was kind of the year for hell from them. He was out almost the whole year. Paul George didn't play a ton. The whole team was just banged up. They were 16-47 when he didn't play and 8-11 when he did. So not great when he played, obviously, still, but way better than when he sat out. And then even this past year, where there was a lot of discourse of like, are they better without him? That was a real thing that people were saying last year at times throughout the season. They were 24-14 last year when he played. That's 52 win pace, and 21-23 when he didn't. That is 39 win pace. So they were still noticeably, not just marginally, but like obviously a better team and won more games at a higher clip when Joel Embiid played last year. So the question is, how much is he going to play? And can they survive sort of having 2 versions of this team? I think one of the reasons people are saying, are they better without him or should they trade him, is because it's like if he's going to play 50% of the games, you basically have 2 different teams. One is the Maxey-led, ball-dominant guard play, get downhill to the basket, play faster with pace, etc. The other is the run the offense through Joel Embiid, get him the ball at the elbow, let him go to work, play a little bit more slow, a little bit more methodical. And they can do both of those, of course. But once you get to like a postseason setting where things are really ratcheting up from an intensity standpoint and the margin for error is so much lower, and you really got to know who your team is to be successful and make a deep run. If they're switching back and forth between one game playing more post-centric through Embiid and slower, the next game he's out and it's more rim running bigs and they're playing faster, more perimeter oriented. Like it's hard to go back and forth. And so that is going to be a real factor here. And so part of me was a little surprised that LeBron wanted to attach himself to a scenario where you're heavily relying on Joel Embiid, even though they're going to be less reliant on him than in years past. And I think if he played 20 games, they're still going to be a good team just because the rest of the talent on the roster. But it is absolutely a variable here in how this plays out. But by far and away, to me, the biggest deciding factor in how this plays out, I think this could go really well, or I also think this could go very badly down a path if this variable isn't optimized for the Sixers. And that is just the buy-in and sacrifice for their starting five. Because just last season, their starting five combined averaged 123 points per game. They had 4 guys average 23 or more, and 3 guys average 27 or more. That's not going to happen. They're not going to have 4 guys average 23 plus. They're not going to have 3 guys average 27 plus. They're not going to have 5 that are averaging 123 combined. It's just not going to happen, which means guys are going to score less. People's roles are going to be a little diminished. There's going to be less shots to go around, less usage to go around. Like last year, Joel Embiid, 34% usage when he played. Maxey, 29%. Jaylen Brown, 36% usage. LeBron, 27% usage. Of course, you can maybe keep 2 dudes in that range, but then somebody's going to take a step back. But they've got like 4 dudes in this range. And so obviously those numbers are not going to hold. The usage isn't going to hold. The shot attempts aren't going to hold. The points per game aren't going to hold. And so the question becomes who's taking that back seat and who is more willing to put the team first. I'll start off by saying I think the best version of this team is the one that Maxey is not taking a back seat. I think he is their best player. I think he has the highest upside. I think he is the most dynamic. I think he is the toughest matchup. And on a night-to-night basis, he is who I would want the offense primarily running through. I want the ball in his hands. I want him creating most of what's happening on the offensive side of the court. And so if he is the one whose usage takes a big dip, then I think the team is worse off. And I think that if they fall into that where Embiid is dominating down low and the other guys are just standing around, or Jaylen Brown tries to make this his team and Maxey's the one who we look up and has 8 field goal attempts and it's midway through the fourth quarter, like that is going to be an issue. I think he needs to be the feature player and the other guys are going to have to adjust, but we'll see if they can. LeBron, I'm not worried about him because I know he's willing and able to defer. We just saw it with Luka and Austin Reeves last season. He was willing to kind of become the third banana when those guys were healthy, let them do most of the ball handling, let them do most of the initiating, playmaking. And LeBron, we've seen him be more willing to defend and be more of the dirty work guy and work as a screener and more of just a hub rather than like a ball dominant, a full-on initiator from the top of the key. And so I know he's capable of doing that. I think he's going to be more willing because he knows the situation he's signing up for. And at his age, I think he's kind of okay with that. I think he wants to take a little bit of a step back and not have to go through the full wear and tear of being the primary feature guy on a team at this point. And he really could comfortably slide into the fourth banana here and be okay with that. So not worried about him. So that leaves Embiid and Jaylen Brown. And those are the 2 guys that I think are going to determine how successful this is. Joel Embiid, he is still very important for this team because of what he brings as a big man. You know, their backup bigs, not great. You know, Adem Bona, Huck Porty from the Knicks they signed this offseason. Like, that's basically it. Those guys, I'm not saying they're awful, but certainly unproven, not exactly high volume rotation players at any point in their career. And so Embiid is going to need to be the guy that's the primary rim protector. He's going to need to be the guy that rebounds 10 to 12 times per game for this team. Like, they need all of those things out of him. But his scoring is going to be less crucial. So the question is, can he commit to being a defense first guy, a rebound first guy, going possessions without touches? And so the health thing is obviously going to be a wild card, but Embiid, I do think, has shown a little bit of a willingness to take at least a little bit of a step back, just because like we've seen him play with Maxey. Like, their dynamic has been mostly fine over the past few seasons. Like, they've won when he's played. Of course, they do start to run more offense through him when he plays, but I just mean that, like, as a big man, he's still used to doing big man things. He's been the rim protector in his career. He's been a good rebounder in his career. He's been a good passer in his career, all those sort of things. So, like, he needs to buy into that a little bit more. Do I think he's going to average 27 points per game? The best version of him on this team? Probably not. But look, he's still going to be in the 20 plus to maybe 25 points per game because he is such a mismatch and he is such a dominant force down there. But to me, the key to success for this team is going to be Jaylen Brown. They do not have a ton of defense on the wing outside of Brown and VJ Edgecombe. Edgecombe, I think, obviously is going to be fine in more of a complimentary role just because he's so young. He's still only going his sophomore year. He hasn't proven himself as a dominant offensive player or anything like that. But Jaylen Brown finished sixth in MVP voting this past season and just left his team primarily because of a power dynamic between him and Jason Tatum in Boston. And some of the calculus that people had about why he was traded was because he wanted his own team. He wanted to be the man. But on this Sixers team, there's a real chance that he becomes sort of the fourth guy, just in the sense of like, I think Maxi's better than him, and he's just a better, more efficient, dynamic offensive player, in my opinion. Joel Embiid has been on this team for over a decade now. He's won an MVP here. His nickname is what was the driving force between this whole roster construction. Like, this is his team, his city, and it probably will continue to be. And when he plays, he might be as good, if not better, than Jaylen Brown offensively still at this point. And then LeBron, obviously later part of his career, but it's LeBron James. It's LeBron James. At worst, the second best player of all time. Many people think he's the GOAT. Like, he's only going to take a back seat and defer if he thinks that's the right thing for the team and if he wants to. Not because Jaylen Brown wants him to, I'll tell you that. So that leaves Brown in a little bit of a weird spot because he's the new guy coming in, but he's not even the biggest headlined name new guy coming in because obviously that's LeBron. And so how Jaylen Brown navigates and handles the new dynamic for this team, to me, is going to dictate how well this works. Because if Brown is okay playing more off ball, having some possessions and even some games where he's standing in the corner for large portions and being more of the threat off ball as a cutter and floor spacer as opposed to initiating offense. If he's okay with being the defensive stopper, we've seen him be a really good perimeter defensive player. We saw him take on the Luka assignment in the finals a few years back, so he's certainly capable of doing that. But he may need to be the main point of attack defender here. So if he can lean into that, if he's okay with picking his spots offensively, and there's going to be some times where they stagger these guys and, you know, maybe beginning in the second quarter, Jaylen Brown has his little 3 to 5 minute stint where they run the offense through him. But that might just be short stints. He's going to have to pick his spots and not try to be the guy all the time. If he's okay with doing the little things, doing the dirty work, being the Swiss Army knife, like, do whatever the team needs me to do because I'm an athletic freak and two-way guy and can score a little, can shoot a little, can defend a little, all of that. If he does all those things and is okay doing all those things, then I think this can work because they need a player like that. And Jaylen Brown is capable of being that and doing that. It's just going to come down to, is he willing to do that? Does he want to do that? Is he down to sacrifice? Because he's not going to get as many shot attempts as he had last year. He's certainly not going to have a 36% usage rate. I think if his usage rate is in the 30s at all, then this is probably not the best version of what the Sixers can or should be. So if he defaults to thinking he's the feature guy and trying to dominate the ball and looking at Embiid and Maxey and saying, look, I won a championship. You guys haven't won anything yet. So you need to follow my lead. Then I think this could go downhill quickly. Because I just don't think Jaylen Brown is built to be the main guy on a team, especially with all the talent on this group. Like, to me, they are needing the little things that Brown can do badly on this roster. And all the things Brown wants to do as a scorer, initiator, all of that, they have enough of that elsewhere on the roster. And so that's why I just think he's going to be so important. If he's cool with 18 to 20 points per game and being the defensive stopper, then I think this team is going to be really dynamic and really good. But I kind of worry about Jaylen Brown as the piece on this team that could make it go downhill just because of all the previous dynamics with personalities that we just saw in Boston. And he's going to be the swing piece here. And I think it's the difference between this team really working and being a true contender, or the difference between this being a team like the 2013 Lakers, for example, who had, Steve Nash, Kobe, Ron Artest, Pau Gasol, Dwight Howard, similarly stacked starting five. They were a little older, but let's not forget that, Nash was coming off a top 10 MVP finish the year before. Kobe was still firmly a top 5 player and first team All NBA guy. Pau Gasol made All NBA second team 2 years later. So clearly still very good. And Dwight was the undisputed, no doubt about it, best center in the NBA at the time. So that team was expected to be a legit contender with a ton of talent. And I'm not saying that the Sixers team is going to be like that team, because I think they won around 45 games and lost in the first round. I know Kobe was hurt, so like that played into it, but they were not close to contending if you watch that team all year. I'm not saying the Sixers are going to be that team. I'm just saying that like if the personalities don't mesh the way that the personalities on that team didn't mesh, then it's on the table, is all I'm going to say. And I think Jaylen Brown is the key and the swing piece. And if he buys in, he sacrifices, he's willing to be the dirty work defensive guy that picks his spots offensively, is the third, maybe fourth fiddle on offense, then this really can work and they can be really good. But if that ego starts to get in the way, then I'm not overly confident and bullish on this team otherwise. So aside from that, let's just talk about the Sixers and where they stand roster wise. I do think there's still some holes on this team. I think that they need defense, like I mentioned. They need willing shooters and they need guys that are willing to play off ball. So like I just talked about Jaylen Brown. If he can do all those things, that's great. That fills a huge need for them. But I think player wise, they need guys that like that's their role. Like today's NBA is not just about talent. It is about people knowing their role, people complementing one another, et cetera. And so like they need players that are going to be like, yeah, I'll stand in the quarter for 25 minutes and be ready to shoot a three when LeBron finds me on the wing off a collapse with a 2-man game with Maxey or something like that. So like that is what they need. They need wing, defense, and shooting. Basically 3-and-D guys. I know they signed Dean Wade, but aside from him, it's just Brown. Like Brown's really the only guy that kind of fits that mold if he's willing and able. I also think, and I've never understood this about the Joel Embiid era. Why would the Sixers not just commit to being like, we are going to have the best backup center in the NBA? We just are. Like why? It has not been a priority at all. They have constantly like scraped the bottom of the barrel and found these either second round pick bigs that just low upside and unproven commodities, or they'll go for these washed veterans like a Dwight Howard late in his career or a Andre Drummond or Montrezl Harrell or something like that. Like I've never understood why they don't just make it number one priority. Go get a legitimate center as our backup that can start 50 games and we would feel comfortable and confident about it. And so I still think their backup big spot is something that they probably could upgrade and should upgrade. And I'll say this. They're pretty strapped salary cap wise, but they do have pieces to move. They have 3 tradable first round picks, 2027, 2029, and 2033. Very valuable picks because one of them's a Clippers pick, and which obviously they're not headed in the right direction right now. And then especially the far out 2033 run when LeBron will have been retired for years and Embiid's career is probably going to be over at that point. Who knows where Maxey and Brown will be? Like that's so far out. That could be a really valuable pick. They also have over 10 second round picks to play with and trade. So they have pieces they could move that would entice other teams to give up some really valuable players. The problem is they don't have a ton of tradable salaries. If we assume the top 5 are just not getting traded, which I think that's probably a fair assumption at this point, Dean Wade and Anthony Simons can't be dealt until mid-December because they signed as free agents this year. Wade makes $9 million. Simons makes $6 million. So those are movable contracts for sure, but they would have to wait into the season. And maybe that's how this plays out and they wait. But those guys also, you could trade them, but they kind of need those guys. You know, Simons is the reliable spark plug scoring guard off the bench that they really wouldn't have otherwise unless Phylon turns into something, but that's no guarantee. Wade is really the only passable 3-and-D wing on the team with legit size that can play, you know, multiple positions, guard multiple positions, etc. After those guys, the next highest salaries on the entire team are LeBaron Phylon at $3.5 million and Dominic Barlow at $3.4 million. So really low numbers. So if we're trying to match salaries here, it becomes really, really difficult. And the Sixers are hard capped at the first apron, so they cannot go above that. They are currently about $3.4 million below the first apron. So if you do the math, Barlow probably makes sense as the one to trade out. If they trade Barlow, they can take back $6.8 million in matching salaries coming back. So pretty low number. Not going to be a lot of impact guys that are making that little, but it doesn't mean that there's nobody out there that they could go at. It's going to be a different demographic where it's more people that are on rookie deals and still early in their career, which of course you may have to overpay for. But if you attach 2 to 3 first round picks next to Barlow, maybe you can get some of these guys away. So I was just thinking through a couple names that they could potentially add. If we're looking at backup bigs, Ves Misi for the Pelicans is someone who's kind of been consistently in trade rumors. The Pelicans seem to be reluctant to move any of their guys, but if you could get one first round pick and Barlow for him, I think you certainly do that. Two might be an overpay, but Misi is the type of guy that I would feel very good about as my Embiid insurance, as a legit rim protector, a nice athletic big on the offensive end that I'm sure Maxey and LeBron could have some nice two-man games with as a rim runner and screener, et cetera. So he's someone I'd consider. Oso Iguodaro for the Suns. They have Kaman Malawach, who played really well in Summer League, and I think they want to make more featured this season. They just re-signed Mark Williams. So all three of those guys probably aren't going to get big minutes, and I think Oso could find himself as the odd man out. Certainly not a defensive rim protector or anything like that, but a really smart and versatile offensive player as a passer out of the short roll. He's a good rim running big, pretty good athlete overall. And so he's somebody that I think could go for cheap. I don't think he's going to command a first round pick. So maybe the Suns are cool to pick up, a handful of seconds for him. I don't know, just something to consider. Or maybe they try to go all in and overpay and sweeten something. I think this is certainly way less likely. But maybe you go to the Raptors and say you can have 3 first round picks for Colin Murray Boyles, for example. In which case, it would be an instant impact player into this rotation, and they might even be better off closing some games with him compared to what they have now. But again, I don't think the Raptors are going to trade him. I'm just saying these are the types of names based on the salary slots they have that they could potentially make a move for. Then if we're looking more on the 3-and-D side of the house, Kenrich Williams, who just re-signed with the Thunder, I believe he may not be trade eligible right away, but his salary is right in that range, and I do think he'd be a nice add for them as an upgrade over someone like Barlow. Ryan Dunn, another guy in the Suns that had kind of fell out of the rotation for them a little bit towards the end of last season, but proven as a good defensive player, can be a point of attack guy. The shot is still inconsistent for sure. But, I do think he would be a worthy gamble for them if they did want to upgrade that backup wing spot. Maybe a guy like Jaime Jaquez, not exactly what they need from he's not some lockdown defender or anything, but a clear, good rotation piece. The Bucks just got him. I would imagine he's already 25 or something like that. So I'd have to think that he's not off limits or anything, just because he is a little bit on the older side as far as prospects go. But he's cheap. And again, maybe 1 first round pick is enough to entice the Bucks there. Again, another guy I'll throw out that's probably way less likely, but maybe you overpay 2-3 first round picks for him. Carter Bryant from the Spurs. I think they like him. I like Carter Bryant. I'd be surprised if they traded him. I'm just saying that those are the types of deals, again, that you could be thinking about. If you wanted to give them an offer they couldn't say no to, and if you're the Spurs and you get 3 first round picks for Carter Bryant, you probably have to think about it. But that's the kind of player that I think that this team could really use. A proven dude who's going to play his role, can defend and tries hard on defense, and at least reliable 3-point shooter to a certain extent. If you look at the free agents remaining, it is slim pickings. They did sign Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as well, who I think was a good add just as a depth piece. He's not what he used to be, but only 3 years ago, he was a starting player on a champion team. And he's had a rough past 2 seasons, but that's because he was being asked to be a featured starting player, and now he's probably going to be 8th, 9th man. So that's a good role for him anyway. But yeah, it's rough. The rest of the free agents right now. I mean, we're talking Maxi Kleber, Gabe Vincent, Nick Richards, maybe Gary Payton, Bruce Brown, Nick Batum. I don't even know if he's retired or not at this point, but those are the kind of guys that are available. I'm not including the Bradley Beals and DeMar DeRozans of the world, because I think that is the last thing that this team needs right now. It's just more one-way players that are just looking to get shots up. I think that they do not need that. But I'll say this. If I'm the Sixers and you've got these 3 tradable first-round picks, you gotta cash in on them somehow. I'm not saying you have to trade all 3 of them, but given that you just signed LeBron James, you just went in on Jaylen Brown, and he's got 3 years left on his deal, and he hasn't signed an extension yet. And Embiid, given where he is in his career with his health issues, now is the time. Now is the window. And now is the opportunity to be seized. And so I think it would be a mistake for them to sit on those. I'm not saying they need to make a trade right now. I think that they have time to see how this melds and see what types of players they might need, what works, what doesn't work. And the trade deadline obviously won't be till February. So I'm not going to make them rush into anything. But if we get past that trade deadline and they still have all those picks, I think it's a huge mistake, because the window's now. You don't make this signing if you don't plan to try to win the championship this season and next season. If LeBron stays, we'll see. But The point is they got to go for it. And so they're in a unique position to have all this talent and have tradable first. Normally when we see teams make these all-in moves with a Brown and a LeBron in the same offseason, they're kind of exhausted of assets, but they do have legitimate assets just because they didn't really have to give up that much to get Brown. And LeBron was cheap and free, basically, from an asset perspective and from a salary perspective. So we'll see what they do. I laid out some of the options, so I don't know exactly what path they'll choose. I think going for 3-and-D wings and a backup big would be where I would allocate those assets, but it's still TBD on who's going to be available, how this meshes, and some more needs might arise depending on where we're at. So the question now I'll shift to is where do the Sixers stack up in the East? And I'll say this, I went through the variables. I talked about that if these guys don't buy in and sacrifice, that I could see this going downhill. So I do have question marks. I'm not going to sit here and say they're the favorite in the East or even like one of my 2 second favorites or something like that, because I do think that they have proving to do. There's a lot of new faces on this team. And even before that, it was already kind of a how does this fit type feel between Maxey and Embiid, because those guys just haven't played that much together because Embiid is so in and out of the lineup. So there's just a lot of question marks across the board here. So to me, I'm kind of tiered out the Eastern Conference teams, at least the non-bottom feeders here. I think tier 1, you have to still say is the Knicks. I don't know how you could see what they did in the postseason last year and really just how consistent they've been over the past couple years as just a solid, at least fringe contender team, bringing everybody back except for Mitchell Robinson, which I won't undersell. I mean, that's a big loss for sure. He's really important for them. But regardless, this is the team to beat until proven otherwise. They clearly have a very high ceiling because they just won the NBA championship. I also think they have a really high floor. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be a top 3 seed and probably win at least around 50 games. And they've just got a good infrastructure. And so to me, you have to put them number 1 right now. And I would put them in a tier of their own just because I think for as like impressive as the East looks right now, every team kind of has some like pretty big question marks. And so if their biggest question mark is how do they replace Mitchell Robinson, that's not, it's not a bad place to be. My tier 2 teams, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I've got in whatever order the Celtics and the Pacers. I am kind of just banking on their proven infrastructure. And that's kind of how I would define this tier. 2 teams that, if fully healthy, have very high floors. And their ceiling's a little TBD. What does Tatum look like coming back? What does Halliburton look like coming back? How does Zubats integrate? Does Paul George play 30 games or does he play 60 games? Like, there are some moving pieces here that could define their ceiling. But I know if Jason Tatum and Halliburton play 65 plus games each, like, they're just going to be good. Like, the Celtics have been an engine year after year after year. We've seen that even when guys are out, they just win games. They win games, and I'm going to bank on that. Missoula's going to get the most out of them in the regular season, and I do think guys like Pritchard can step up. I like the Mitchell Robinson ad. I'm higher on Paul George the most, as I talked about on my last podcast, and so I don't think that's some crazy drop-off when you look at Tatum in the Brown spot, and then you add Paul George to that. You still got Derek White, who had a down shooting year, but they should have enough defense. They should have enough offense. They've got a good system in place. Like, I just trust the infrastructure of the Celtics right now. And then on the Pacers side, it's like, look, if Halliburton is a compromised shell of himself, not quite what he looked like before, then of course this could be a moot point. But if he's at least 90% of what he was pre-injury, like, this team's just going to be a machine offensively like they were. They've got a better defensive center than they had before as well. A little new dynamic with a screen and roll game between Halliburton and Zubats. They've got good depth bench pieces around all these guys. I trust Rick Carlisle. Like, to me, those 2 teams are the safest bet. So that's why I have them in the second tier here. High floors, ceiling's a little TBD, but ceiling could be as high as anyone. I mean, the Celtics just won the championship 2 years ago. Pacers were just in the finals last year. So they're proven commodities more so than the rest of these teams. The third tier, this is where I would slot the Sixers in with the Raptors and Heat. And these are 3 teams that I think have a ton of talent, but still some major question marks across the board. They're high ceiling teams, but I also think low floor teams. Like the Raptors, obviously I'm operating under the assumption that Kawhi Leonard will be on the team next year and that trade will go through. Love him and Scotty Barnes. That is as good a duo, I would say, as basically anybody in the Eastern Conference right now. You add Colin Murray, Boyle's in there, quickly back, hopefully healthy this coming season after being banged up towards the end of last year. RJ Barrett's still there in the fold, but I'm not the biggest Barrett fan, and I don't love a ton of the rest of this roster. I don't think they have a ton of depth. Their center position is a real question mark unless you're just going to ask CMB to play that full time. I don't love the RJ Barrett fit as sort of your third or fourth fiddle because I think he's not a very good off-ball player and is going to want the ball in a way that could take looks away from Scottie and Kawhi, etc. But with the Scottie Kawhi duo, the defensive floor that this team's going to have, I think that they are a force to be reckoned with and really, really talented. The Heat, I've already kind of talked about them on my last pod quite a bit as well, but the shooting issue is a real issue. But when you got Bam and Giannis, it's a good place to start. They're going to be really good defensively too. So again, it's like a ton of talent, high ceiling with that duo, and then you throw Wiggins in there. They have some other decent rotation pieces, but man, the playmaking, the guard play, the shooting, very big question mark. And so I can't put them any higher than this. And then the Sixers I have in this tier just because of all the things I mentioned. Like, do I think they could win the Eastern Conference? Yes, I do think they could win the Eastern Conference, but I got to see it first. Like the Knicks, Pacers, Celtics, I've seen it. I know what the proof of concept is for those teams. I know what it looks like when they're at playing their best, and I know it translates to winning not only in the regular season but also in the postseason. The Sixers, I just have some questions about what everyone's role is going to be. Who's going to take the back seat? Who is going to be late in these games, the one that's taking the shots, and who's going to be okay being differential and doing more of the little things. And so once we get that answered, maybe this team bumps up easily to not only tier 2, but to tier 1 in the East for me. But I just think that for right now, I want to see the proof of concept before I vault them up because the talent is undeniable, but the fit and how these guys complement each other is still TBD. And that's something that has been massive in the recent era of the NBA. It's not just about talent. You have to have guys that are willing to play a role, guys that are willing to be complementary pieces rather than just trying to be the highest usage, best scoring version of themselves, which that's normally how we see the downfall of some teams is when they have a little bit too much of that and not enough guys that are willing to do the dirty work. So again, very talented, but I have them in this third tier with the Raptors and Heat. And then the fourth tier, I would define as probably either miss their window or clearly need another move to become more relevant. And that would be the Cavs, Pistons, Magic, and Hawks. All teams that made the playoffs last year, all teams that have different question marks. The Cavs, the fit with the roster is not great. They looked pretty pathetic down the stretch of the postseason. Didn't really add anybody noteworthy. And I think another year of James Harden, older, already not going to be probably his best self when they need it the most in the postseason. So it's hard to really believe in them. The Pistons, the Tobias Harris to John Collins move, fine in a vacuum. Still think they're losing a little bit too much creation. They haven't really added anybody. Duran is still not signed. Like, Isaiah Joe, sure, like the piece, but just across the board, they do not have enough offense, and I think the rest of the East has caught up to them. Same for the Magic. The offense is ugly. They got a new coach. We'll see if that makes a difference. But again, I just think the rest of the East is caught up and kind of past them. And then the Hawks, I like everything they've done. I think they're talented, but they just don't really have the star power or firepower that any of the other teams I mentioned right now. I think Jalen Johnson's great, but I think he's probably long-term best suited as a strong number 2 rather than the number 1 guy. And the Hawks are in a good spot because like they got $1 million assets. They've got tradable contracts. They've got young guys. So like this isn't a knock on where they're at or anything like that. I just feel like from a talent perspective, they are missing like the centerpiece guy, which they can get it, sure. But for right now, that's why they're here. So that's how I see the East right now. I'm obviously subject to change. We got some offseason left. Some moves could still be made. See how preseason and whatnot shakes out. But I've got the Sixers in sort of the tier 3 group with the Raptors and Heat behind the Knicks, the Pacers, and the Celtics. But it's fluid. That could change. We'll see how that goes. Now I want to shift over to LeBron and ask, was this the right choice for him? Did he make the right decision by signing with Philadelphia? And I talked about my favorite teams and just went through all the suitors on my last podcast. I said that my personal favorite was the Timberwolves. I thought that their starting 5 was perfectly complementary. All the things I've said about my question marks for the Sixers, I wouldn't have had any of those with the Wolves because I know Rudy Gobert is going to play a role. I know Jaden McDaniels is going to play a role. They still would have had the talent and offensive firepower and scoring with Ant and LaMelo, but they also would have had the defense that I feel comfortable with McDaniels and Gobert. They would have had some nice depth pieces as well. So that was my favorite piece overall. You got a proven coach with a good track record as well. Next, I probably would have had the Heat. This one grew on me a little bit. I still think it wouldn't have been perfect just because of the lack of shooting, but I think the talent would have been overwhelming. The defense would have been elite. I think LeBron would have fixed a core issue with ball handling and playmaking, which they don't have a lot of right now. They're really going to be relying on Giannis and Bam to do that. And I don't want those guys doing that. I don't want them having to be the primary initiators every single night when they're going to be asked to do a lot defensively too. And also you want to keep those guys healthy and preserved come postseason time. But LeBron would have helped a lot of that. So I do think the Heat was an increasingly enticing option, in my opinion. Then I had the Cavs third, not because it's a good fit. It's clunky in a way that I think is similar to the Sixers with a lot of talent, but not a lot of complementary pieces. It's like a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of guys that want shots with only one ball to go around. But at the very least, you have this homecoming narrative. He would have been fully embraced and accepted no matter the result. If the Cavs fall flat, and LeBron's on the team, those fans, obviously they would have rather won, but they're not going to resent LeBron in any sort of way. They're going to just know the team probably wasn't good enough. They weren't going to have crazy expectations, and it would have been more of just an appreciation for his greatness, and he could have had a more worthy farewell tour. Then I would have had the Sixers fourth for all the reasons I've talked about. I still think they're above the Warriors just because I didn't see how they were going to be relevant enough to make it worth it. Like, not only do I not think they would have been good, I don't even think they would have maybe been a lock to make the playoffs, which is kind of crazy to say. Would have been kind of cool to see him and Steph together at first, but I think when we look up in March and they're like a 500 team, it would have been kind of like, man, this probably was not the best option because built around all these old guys that are injury prone and they don't even have a ton of talent around them anyways. But ultimately, this comes down to fit and ability to win and then sort of legacy and acceptance, if you will. So I already kind of talked about the fit and how I think they'll win. But from the acceptance/legacy side of this, I worry about this decision if it doesn't go as planned. I think it could turn into a very sad exit. If this team flames out first round or even loses second round, if they win only 47 games, guys are in and out of the lineup, there's some butting heads, like blah, blah, blah. Like, Sixers fans are ruthless. And this is a new stop. They have zero allegiance to him. Zero. So will he be embraced the way he wants to? If he goes back to Cleveland, they are welcoming him with open arms. If he goes back to Miami, he won 2 championships in Miami. Those fans would adore him. And so you go to Philadelphia where he's never played, really no ties at all. Even the Warriors, like, there's at least the ties of like he is played against that team so many times, went to war with them, obviously close with the core guys there. There's none of that here, really. I mean, I know Maxi's a clutch guy, but just from like the fan base perspective, like if they fall flat, these fans, they're not afraid to boo. They're not afraid to get nasty. Like, do we want LeBron James's last game ever being played being one where the team is booed off the court? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but we can't rule it out. Like, they aren't going to accept him in the same way unless there's success. There were safer bets with Miami and Cleveland where even if they fell flat, the fans are going to love him. They're going to embrace him. They're going to appreciate what he's brought to the franchise. Whereas the Sixers, it's going to be very, what have you done for me lately? If they lose second round, it's going to be like, cool, well, we could have done that without you. And you're not the franchise savior. You didn't bring us to places we haven't been. So why are we going to think anything differently of you? And if he starts to decline, it might feel like a Shaq Celtics meme waiting to happen, unfortunately. But on the flip side, it's a high risk move in that factor because it could turn into this like we don't appreciate or accept you type move. But on the flip side, if they win, I mean, even if they make the finals, I don't even think they necessarily have to win the championship. Then it might have been the best move for his legacy because he already accomplished what he did in Cleveland. He already accomplished what he did in Miami. No player has ever won 4 rings with 4 different teams. And this could be the opportunity to do that. I don't think they're going to win the championship. I think they're pretty far removed from that still. I would not have them in the core contending group right now, as I mentioned. But if they were to somehow get there, maybe everything goes perfectly, these guys fully buy in, they add some pieces, and here they are, and they win the championship. Like, it would be pretty incredible for his legacy because not only would it be a 5th championship, he'd be the only guy to win it with 4 teams. And you can't say he joined an established contender. This core has not made the Eastern Conference Finals since 2001, 25 years ago. Embiid has been with this team for over a decade now. His core, he's had Ben Simmons, James Harden, Jimmy Butler, Tyrese Maxey, etc. You name it, have not gotten out of the second round. And I don't think anybody before this move, even with the Jaylen Brown addition, nobody had them as like real contenders. Maybe they thought they'd be better than last year because of the upgrade over Paul George, maybe a top 4 seed. Nobody was going to pick them to make the finals. They just weren't. And there'd be no reason to, because you don't know what's happening with Embiid. And without Embiid, just Brown and Maxey wasn't going to be enough to make the finals. And this team, as I mentioned, has not won a championship since 1983. And they've kind of been generally dysfunctional. So if he could come in and be the needle mover, get them to the promised land, like, I do think it really would resonate in a way similar to the Cleveland title. I know it's different, even more so because he's from there. He promised them, blah, 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 all that. Like, but it would probably be his second most valuable title to an extent after the Cleveland one, just because of it, joining this team, where they've been, how they haven't been able to get over the hump, and then to do it in your first or second season, because I don't think he's going to probably play more than 2 more years. Like, it really would go a long way. Even if he's not the number one guy, like, we know he's going to be a contributor. I don't think he has to be like finals MVP and blah, 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 all that. Like, at age 42, if the guy wins it at age 42, like, I mean, build him a statue, like, at that point. So it's high risk, high reward. I think the reward here is greater than if he goes to Miami, greater than if he goes to Cleveland, but the risk is significantly higher. You know, these fans might turn on him because they don't have the allegiance to him, but they also, he would be the savior if they won. And so did he make the right decision? I still wouldn't have been my first choice, because I think all these same conversations would be similar if he gone to like Minnesota, for example, except I think that there's less risk because they're generally a losing franchise, and just them being relevant is kind of exciting for them given where they have been throughout their franchise's history. So nobody's going to like hate LeBron if they don't win or something like that, versus Sixers fans can be a little brutal. So it wouldn't have been my first choice, but I applaud him because I do think it's going to be at the very least very interesting, very fun. I don't know how it's going to play out. If you haven't been able to tell, like, I'm not overreacting on the bandwagon of like they're contenders now, but I can't rule it out. Like, this team is like a total wild card to me. Could they win 58 games and be the 1 seed in the East? Yeah, they absolutely could. But could they be a 43-win team that's a 7 or 8 seed in the play-in? I also think that's possible. So I don't know. The outcome range is huge for me, and I'm willing to kind of expect anything, but I think it's mostly going to come down to, will these guys have buy-in? Will they have sacrifice, like I mentioned? And then I'm just going to quickly wrap up rapid fire. The LeBron suitors that did not secure his services, where do they go now? So, spoiler, a lot of these teams are not in a great spot. The Cavs, this roster just does not fit. There's Jonathan Kuminga rumors that was the fallback option. Don't think he's helping. You know, he's could not be more of the antithesis of what this team actually needs. They signed Mario Hezonja today. Good job. He's not solving anything. This team's far away. They've probably peaked, in my opinion. And the 2 guards, the 2 bigs, those combos they haven't worked super well. They don't have enough complementary guys. They don't have enough wing defense. They don't have guys that do more than one thing well. And I just, sure, could they make the playoffs next year as a 4 or 5 seed? Yeah, I bet they could. Could they maybe make the conference finals again next year? I'd be surprised by it, but I can't totally rule it out. But they were so far from making the finals last year, and I don't know how they get there with the core they have. I feel like they are honestly due for a step back. I wouldn't be surprised if they're more in the play-in range and not really sniffing that 50 games that they have won over the past few seasons. The Heat, more talented than they were for sure with the Giannis move, but I'm not going to beat this dead horse here. But the offensive issues, the shooting, the lack of spacing, the ball handling, the playmaking, all of that, it's just they don't have any of it. And they're going to be really Bam and Giannis reliant as ball handlers and playmakers. They're capable, but to me, that's not an ideal formula. It reminds me a lot of the Rockets last year. A lot of talent, a lot of defense, dynamic players that can be super impactful. But at the end of the game, who's generating shots? Who's knocking down an open 3 in the corner when the defense collapses? Who's even initiating the offense? You know, it's just going to be a lot of clunkiness offensively, I feel. And so I like their infrastructure across the board with just that organization and Eric Spoelstra, et cetera. You add Giannis in the mix, it's certainly interesting. And I think they're in a better spot than most of the other teams I'm talking about here just because of that. But man, they have like serious holes and serious flaws that I'm not sure that they can internally fix. The Warriors, they were not going to be playoff locks or even close to contention, even with LeBron. I think right now their absolute best case is a play-in team, maybe 7 or 8 if they're lucky, just because it's a little weaker down there in the West than it has been in years past. I think their absolute best case scenario is they survive floating around 500 until Jimmy's back. And I think that would be a miracle, in my opinion. That's what they did a couple years ago when they traded for Jimmy. But that's, again, the best case for them. If Steph misses any time, they're going to be a losing team, a bad team. But it's no guarantee that Jimmy even comes back and looks like his normal self. He's into his late 30s now, and ACL is a serious injury, obviously. So we will see. But I'm not bullish or optimistic on them at all. There were some reports today that, the Joe Lacob is more looking to build for what comes after Steph Curry, that Steph in the front office might not be seeing eye to eye. So we'll see. I don't think they're going to trade him, obviously, but maybe that would be actually in the best interest for both him and the franchise if they really aren't going to try to build around him now. And it really is a shame just because they're kind of wasting the twilight years of his career. But the Timberwolves, talked about them on my last spot too, but they have a lot of the pieces to make things happen. But again, they have a major, major hole at the wing spot. McDaniels is really the only guy in the whole roster, excluding LaMelo, obviously, who's a point guard. But that's between 6'6" and 6'10" that you even remotely trust to do anything on this team and be a competent rotation piece. They went from a team where size was sort of their superpower. That was their big advantage on teams. To now they're a pretty tiny team. Gobert, outside of him, as I said, they don't really have anybody above 6'6" to trust outside of McDaniels. And he's tall, but he's really thin and lanky, and he's not exactly bulky and giving you the size that they had in the past with guys like Randall, Naz Reid, Karl Anthony Towns, etc. So they had options. I would have liked the Rui Hachimura fit, for example, but I don't know where they go now. I don't know how they fill that spot. If they don't fill that spot, to me, that they are just, clearly a piece away, and I don't think they're close to contention. But if they can get someone to fill that spot, then I think they're not so far off, and I think they are one of the more legitimate teams to at least be a threat to San Antonio and Oklahoma City. But again, the roster right now is very imbalanced. It's thinner than it's been in years past, and the talent is probably greater, but we'll see where they go. LeBron really would have solved a lot of issues for them, and that's why this was my favorite fit for him. And then lastly, I will talk for 2 seconds about the Lakers, because obviously this is LeBron's previous team, but they, to me, are worse than last year. I think they filled the center spot, upgraded there, probably. I do like Walker Kessler, but again, as I said on my last podcast, not a sure thing. He is still very unproven. He hasn't been able to stay healthy, and offensively, still TBD on what he is. And then outside of that, you lose LeBron, who I think was still so important for them. The team and the fans there, they want to discount what he did and what he brought to the team. But I'm he was so important as a secondary playmaker, and then just really as a wing with size that can be a big body that they can run some offense through as a hub. And I don't know. He was a beast in transition. They're just going to miss what he does more than I think they will. And none of the guys they added are going to replicate any of that. All their free agent signings, a bunch of eighth men. So they're locked into this core. They have no flexibility. They have Luka, Reeves, Kessler, and then 8 different guys that, I don't even know who their 4th best players. Could be any of them, but I don't mean that in a complimentary way. Could be any of them could be their 9th best guy also. So all the teams that miss LeBron, not in a phenomenal spot. So we will see where they go. But, the Sixers, I'll just continue to reiterate. I think the range of outcomes for them is wide. And they have an immense amount of talent, but it's going to be, can Nick Nurse get these guys to buy in a way where the total is greater than the sum of the parts? And I worry that the sum of the parts will be greater than the total. And I'm, again, willing to be wrong, but I am not immediately bullish on this team as some big time contender. I think that there's a lot of question marks they still need to answer, but certainly they've got time to work through it. And I'll be watching at the very least. I'll tell you that I will be watching. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Sean Jones NBA Show. Thank you so much for listening. This really was probably the last big domino of the offseason. I know we're going to have like Kuminga is going to sign, Duran's going to sign, probably back to the Pistons just because of the restricted free agency rules. Peyton Watson, probably same thing. Maybe we get a sign and trade there. DeMar DeRozan, Bradley Beal, like there are some names. Nobody that's going to move the needle at this point, assuming Duran stays with the Pistons. But even if he was to go somewhere else, not totally sure where it would be. Not sure if they're moving the needle to full contention or anything like that. So we'll see. May take a few weeks, and I'll do some season previews. We're not that far off from training camp or anything like that. I'll also have my top 100 rankings out before the season starts, but maybe a little quieter over the next few weeks. Might do some other kind of parking lot off-season topics that I've been ruminating on, but we shall see. But I'm glad LeBron finally signed. It's going to be a fun season to see how that plays out with Philadelphia. And even if they aren't super good, it's going to be fun to watch. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening, and I will chat with you soon.